છે ને?
હા ઓડિબલ છે.
Okay, fine.
So welcome back everyone. So after lunch break, we shall now begin our next technical session. So this session 3 is on environmental impact assessment by Mrs. Huma Sayyed, Associate Professor of Environmental Engineering Department from LD College of Engineering. So let me introduce her first. So Professor Huma Sayyed is an Associate Professor of Environmental Engineering at LD College of Engineering, Ahmedabad. She holds a BE in Environmental Engineering from Gujarat University, where she was a gold medalist, and an ME in Environment Management. She has extensive academic experience, having served as a lecturer and associate professor at LD College of Engineering and Government Engineering College, Bhuj. She has published around 25 research papers, and she has a strong expertise in water and wastewater treatment, industrial wastewater treatment, environmental audit, design of treatment units, and environmental modeling. She also carried out environment audit as a Schedule 1 auditor for 18 years, and she has also assessed audit reports for more than 50 industries. So this is a very good opportunity કે આપણને ચાન્સ મળ્યો છે કે મેડમને આપણે સાંભળીએ. ઓકે, તો હું બધાને રિક્વેસ્ટ કરું છું કે પેશન્ટલી મેડમના લેક્ચરને તમે અટેન્ડ કરજો. કોઈ ક્વેશ્ચન હોય તો રેઝ કરજો. ઓકે, મેડમ સ્ક્રીન શેર કરી દઉં ને?
Yeah, please.
ઓકે. હેડ ઓફિસમાં જેટલા લોકો છે એટલા લોકોએ જોઈન કરી લીધું છે ને? કોઈ કન્ફર્મ કરશે મને મેસેજ ડ્રોપ કરીને? હેડ ઓફિસમાં જે કમિટી રૂમમાં નથી છે. ઓકે ઓકે, બધા આવી ગયા છે ને? તો આપણે ચાલુ કરીએ. ઓકે
ઓકે.
સ્ક્રીન વિઝિબલ છે. ઓકે, તો મેડમ આપ શરૂ કરી દો.
Yeah, અને પેલું ફૂલ સ્ક્રીન કરી દો ને.
એકચ્યુઅલી મેમ ફૂલ સ્ક્રીન કરીશ ને તો આમાંથી બહાર નીકળી જવાય
ઓકે,
છે.
તો મને વાંધો નથી. ઇટ્સ ઓકે. So I am starting. Good afternoon to all the participants.
આપને વિઝિબલ છે ને?
હા, મને વિઝિબલ છે, વાંધો નહીં.
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon to all the participants of this online induction training program. I'm very happy to talk with you regarding this topic on environmental impact assessment. So, in fact, this is a very, I can say, a very long area or a full-fledged subject can be allotted for this. But I'll try to cover up the basic idea within this 1 hour. The topics which I would like to cover. So first of all, I'll start with the definition as to what we mean by environmental impact assessment, what is the need and objective, then what are the legal requirements, and then finally how the EIA is to be carried out. That is the EIA process. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, so we can start describing about the environmental impact assessment. First, we define what do we mean by environment, because unless we know what is environment, we cannot assess it. Right? So, environment is a combination of physical, chemical, biological, social, economic, and cultural factors affecting the humans. And important is the relationship between and among them. So, you must, all of you must have heard it many times and places. But here, important is what is the relationship, because we human beings are dependent upon this. Be aware of it. We may not be aware. of the along with them and between the different components also, right? Then second is environmental impact. So the basic idea behind EIA is that whenever any project is carried out, whenever any activity is carried out, then that is likely to have some impacts on the different parts of the environment, right? So sum total of this environmental effects will affect the overall quality of the environment. So environmental impact is a word which is, you can say, a combination of all the environmental impacts, right? And then we have environmental impact assessment. So it is a systematic preventive process used to evaluate the potential environmental, social, and economic consequences of a proposed development project before it is approved. So, as I've said, that EIA is a process which we will carry out prior to the project being started, right? So, in that, what we have to do, we have to estimate, or we have to identify, we have to predict that what will be the impacts of a project on the different components of environment. So you, in that way, it is a very systematic study. Otherwise, what happens if we don't have any document like this, maybe we may forget one or two points. But here it is very systematic process. Then preventive process, in the sense that if we can say, if we can identify that this is going to be the impact, we can take steps to prevent the harmful impacts of that project, right? So this is in brief regarding the definition. Next, please. Okay. So before talking about EIA, first of all, let us identify what do we mean by this different terms, effects and impacts and all. So one thing is that whenever any activity is going to be carried out, here we have given an example of urban development. Supposing your a particular city is expanding in size, or there are new residential processes or industrial processes coming up in an area, right? Then that will be the human action or man action. Now, whenever there will be urban development, we all know that we will have paved surfaces, we will have impervious surfaces, like there will be construction of buildings, then you will have roads, then you will have walkways. So these will all increase the impervious surfaces. Now, when the rainfall will occur, the rain cannot percolate into the ground. The rain will be collected either on the surface, or it will overflow into the river or lake or estuary. Here, the example is given of estuary. Then, because of that flow of fresh water into the estuary, there will be reduction in salinity of estuary, right? So these are all the, you can say, effects, environmental effects which are affecting a particular water body. Now, when the salinity is reduced, then the size of the commercial fish might decrease, right? So there will be some fishermen who will be living, who will be having their livelihood in the fishing process. So when the production of that fishes is reduced, then there will be an economic loss to the fishermen, and hence this will cause the migration of the fishermen. So this is only one small aspect of urban development which we have taken into consideration. If so, urban development is one thing, and it is affecting at a third stage to the fishermen, who are not going to be benefited by the project at all, right? So this is showing us that there is a relationship, that how the human action can affect adversely on the environment, and ultimately affect all the different components of the environment. So whenever we need our environmental component protection for long-term survival of this planet Earth, right? Then important is legal compliance, of course, because EIA has now become a legal requirement as per the different notifications which are published in our country. And moreover, public participation is also an important part of EIA. Next, please. Objectives of EIA. So, what will be the different steps when we go for EIA? So, we will have to predict the environmental impacts. Then, once we know about the impacts, we have to very important. It will help in decision making because everything becomes clear as to whether the damage is more or the benefit is more. So then we can take the decision and then promote the sustainable development. Right? Okay, next please. There is too much to be covered in this 1 hour. So I think I'll go a little bit fast so that I can cover all my aspects, right? Okay, so my next idea is regarding the EIA notifications in India. So India has taken a lead in um, making the EIA compulsory for the development projects. And first notification was issued in 1994. It is all coming under the Environmental Protection Act 1986, right? And then this EIA, this notification was later on amended, and EIA notification 2006 was published, and it has 2006 notification has superseded the EIA notification 1994. So 94 is now not existing. Only we have to abide by 2006. And then after that, there have been a number of amendments which are issued by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. But EIA notification 2006 remains the basic, you can say, basic notification to which certain changes have been made. So in this presentation, I'll be talking about EIA notification 2006. Basic things will remain the same. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide again. Okay. What is the purpose? So why this EIA notification was published or issued? So it is for imposing certain restrictions and prohibitions on. So this will be applicable to this notification will be applicable to all the new projects or activities, means all the new projects which are going to take place after this notification has been issued. It will also be applicable on expansion or modernization of existing projects or activities. So supposing our industry is there, now it is trying to increase its production rate, or it is trying to go for more products, or some products are changed. So under all the circumstances, it will have to go for the process of environmental impact assessment. And before going for the new activities or projects, they will require a prior environmental clearance, requiring prior environmental clearance from central government or state level environmental impact assessment authority. So this is the purpose. Next, please. Okay. Now, as per this EIA notification 2006, all the projects which are to be taken up, they are broadly categorized into two categories. category E and category A and category B. And this categorization is based on the spatial extent of impact. That means to how much distance or how much space this project will affect. Then, based on the impact which will be there on natural and man-made resources and the impact on the health. So this is something which is decided by the MOEF, and they have classified the projects as category A and category B. If you will, this EIA notification 2006 is already available on internet, or if you search for it, you will get it. Then at the end means at the end of this notification, a table is put. I think that is I think it is Annexure 1 itself. So Annexure 1 itself, they have given that what are category A industries and what are category B industries. So they have classified. So depending upon the activity, depending upon the product, depending upon the quantity, means how much is the capacity of your industry, they are classified as category A and category B. Just for example, I have prepared this table to show. So if you are going for mining of minerals and the area of your mining is greater than or equal to 50 hectares, then your activity will be classified as category A. And if your area is less than 50 hectares, it will be classified as category B, right? So same activity, but because the area is less, because the spatial extent of impact is less, this is classified as B. Thermal power plant, capacity more than 500 megawatt, then category A. Less than 500 megawatt, category B. So this is just an example. You have almost 4 or 5 pages more than that of classification of different categories, right? So anybody who is undertaking a project or executing a project, first of all, he'll have to see he is falling in which category, category A or category B, right? Okay, then next please. Then EC means environmental clearance. So environmental clearance by whom? So all projects which are falling under category A will require environmental clearance from central government in Ministry of Environment and Forest, and they will base decision on recommendation by a committee which will be expert appraisal committee. So EAC is expert appraisal committee, which is constituted at the central level by Ministry of Environment and Forest. Anybody whose project is falling under category A, he will have to directly approach, or he'll have to directly go to MOEF to get the environmental clearance. Whereas all the categories, all the projects which are under category B, they will require environmental clearance from State Environmental Impact Assessment Authority, right? So that will be a state level body, and this SEIAA shall base its decision on recommendations of state level expert appraisal committee, that is SEIAA. Right? So there will be a committee. Now, state process. So there will be if you are planning to have or a new industry or a new activity or a new project, then for the environmental clearance, these following 4 activities will have to be carried out. The first activity is called screening. Next, please. Next, please. Okay. So screening will be applicable for category category B projects only. So all the projects which are falling under category A, that means they have to compulsorily go for EIA. So they compulsorily need EIA. As far as category B is concerned, then it has to be decided that whether they need EIA or whether they don't require EIA. So first of all the industries which are under category B project, they will have to make an application which the format of which is given in form 1. So if you will refer to the EIA notification, you will see that after the categories of after the table regarding the categories, there will be one format which is format for form 1. So in form 1, all the requirements which are to be submitted, all the data which is to be submitted, that will be given. Like it will require what is the name of the industry, what will be the product of the industry, raw materials, everything regarding the industry will have to be put into the form 1, right? Then that form 1 will be submitted to SEAC. SEAC will do the scrutiny of that form, and then based on their experience and their expertise, they will determine whether the project or activity requires environmental studies or not. Means whether you require to carry out the EIA or whether you don't require EIA, right? So all the projects which will require EIA, they will be classified as B1, and those which don't require EIA will be classified as B2. So if your industry falls in the category of B2, then you don't have to do the EIA. But if it is under B1, you have to do the EIA. So at the end of the screening process, one thing is clear, that all the B1 industries and all A category industries have to go for the EIA process. Next, please. Okay. Then comes the second area, that is the scoping. Now, before that, whenever you are submitting form 1, then along with the form 1, you have to submit this thing document which is known as TOR. TOR is terms of reference. So terms of reference will be submitted by the applicant, which will be containing the aspects regarding what the proponent is going to do for the control of environmental pollution. Okay, then comes the second stage, is scoping. So who will do the scoping? So for category A projects, scoping will be done by Expert Appraisal Committee, EAC, and for B1, it will be done by State Level Expert Appraisal Committee, right? Then scoping in this step, the committees will determine the comprehensive terms of reference. Like it will prepare each and every aspect which is addressing all relevant environmental concerns, and that will be necessary for preparation of EIA report, right? So in form 1, the proponent has already given all the information. So based on that, then based on the TOR, and sometimes even site visit may be required, based on everything, they will give their comprehensive terms of reference. So terms of reference is nothing but, you can say, a list of requirements which will have to be carried out by the proponent in the form of EIA report, right? Next, please. Okay, then there is one clause over here which is worth understanding, that if TOR is not finalized and conveyed to the applicant within 60 days, within 60 days of the receipt of Form 1, then TOR suggested by the applicant shall be deemed as final TOR approved for the EIA studies. Okay, what do we mean by this? Supposing you are a proponent and you are proposing that you have applied for this thing to the SEAC and you have submitted Form 1. So this committee has to reply to you. It has to give you the TOR within 60 days. If it does not happen, then the TOR which you have proposed, that will be the final, and you have to carry out the EIA based on that TOR. Then whatever TOR is has to be displayed on the website of MOEF or SEIAA. So if you will again go to the site of SEIAA, you will be able to see the TOR which it has given for different industries. Right now, after this scoping project, so again, what has happened? The proponent has received a letter, or he has received a TOR, which will give him idea that okay, now I have to carry out the EIA process. I have to prepare the EIA report, and my report should contain at least these things which are required by this TOR. Right? So the industry has to, or the proponent has to go for the EIA process. What will be the steps of EIA process, that I'll discuss afterwards. But here let us see what is required as far as legal aspects are concerned. Right? So that person will go for, he will hire a consultant, he will go for the EIA process. The consultant will do all the activities required for EIA, and then he will prepare the EIA draft report, which it will submit to the authorities. Right? Next, please. Okay, then then we come to the third stage for the EIA process, and that is known as public consultation. Public consultation is a very important step in EIA, and irrespective of whichever country you are carrying out EIA, this is an integral part of the decision making process. So, public consultation involves making the local affected person by informing the local people that what is going to happen in their surrounding area. So all the people who are going to be affected by the project, they have to be informed that okay, this is going to happen in your nearby area, because ultimately they will be the persons who will be directly affected by that project. Supposing you are staying in a particular area, and an industry is coming up near your house, then whenever there will be emission of air pollutants, who is going to be affected? You are going to be affected. So naturally, you should be aware, you should be knowing that I'm going to be affected by this industry. So it is very important. Otherwise, what happens later on when the process is already started and you start being affected, then the local people will raise concerns. The local persons will raise the concerns, and it will
Excuse me, ma'am. Slide sharing બંધ થઈ ગયું છે, હું ફરીથી start કરું.
હા, પણ સંભળાય છે તો ખરું ને?
હા, સંભળાય છે.
Okay, so I can continue. So the local people who are going to be affected, they should be aware. Supposing a highway is constructed near your house, or supposing you are having a field, તમારું ખેતર છે, તો ખેતરમાંથી એક રોડ બનવાનું છે કે એક ટ્રાફિક જવાનું છે, તો you are going to be affected. So at least you should be knowing what is happening. Otherwise, it has been felt. This has all come because based on experience, because many projects had to be abandoned because the local community was not taken into confidence. Local community was not knowing. Then they started knowing, and they will raise opposition. There will be court cases. Many other things will happen. So, in order to avoid all that, it is necessary that public who is going to be affected should be knowing. So, it is public consultation, public hearing, or communication to the public, that is a very important part of EIA process, right? So here, as per the legal requirements, all the people who are going to be affected, means all the local affected persons are told about the project. So all category A and category B1 projects have to undertake public consultation. They will have to go for the process of public hearing. So the process in our country, we call it as public hearing. Public hearing will be carried out at the site. Means, supposing if it is a industry, then in that industry premises itself, or it may be somewhere nearby that industry, and it will be in close proximity. And it is, the purpose is that all the local affected persons can raise their concerns, or they can ask about their discuss about their problems associated with the industry. Then as per the CIA notification, they can also give their responses in written form. If you will refer to this notification, you will come to know about many other things which are associated with this, how the public hearing has to be carried out, how the information has to be conveyed to all the affected persons, right? So in short, what I mean to say, that you will require to have a meeting between the authorities, the industry, and the affected people, and in that all the concerns will be taken care of. The industry will have to make certain commitments. Industry will have to clear the doubts of the local people. Okay, next please. Okay, so once this public consultation is over, then and all that is happening in the public hearing, that will be usually recorded. Videography will also be done, and written way also, everything will be documented. So at that time, whatever concerns have been raised by the people, that applicant, means the one who is proposing the industry, that will say, he will say, okay, I will do it, or whatever commitment. Then after public consultation, he will have to make the changes in the EIA report. He will have to make all the changes in the okay, one thing I forgot. Before public consultation, the draft EIA report will be made available to the affected people. The consultant or the proponent of the industry will have to publish the EIA, the summary of EIA, in the local language also, so that the local community can understand. Because maybe the local community will not understand if it is only in English. So it has to be published in the local language, and so that everyone will come to know. Okay, so now they have to make the changes in the draft EIA. So it will take some time for them to prepare the new EIA. Then the final EIA will be submitted to the concerned regulatory authority. So once that is again submitted, then submitted to the regulatory authority for appraisal. The applicant may, now sometimes it may happen that he will not make the main changes to the main draft EIA, but he will prepare another supplementary report, and he will prepare uh, uh, an EMP addressing all the concerns and he will give it to the submit it to the authority. Next, please. Okay, then comes the next stage, that is the appraisal. So appraisal means that now again the regulatory authority has got the final EIA report. So we will go through that final EIA report and see that what changes have been proposed by the industry or by the applicant. Then sometimes they may also call the applicant for the final appraisal. So during the proceedings, the applicant shall be invited for furnishing necessary clarifications in person or through an authorized representation. Representative. That means the industry may come or some consultant, who is the representative. He may come for the proceedings and he may make the presentation showing that what all changes it has done to the EIA report. Right? Then a detailed scrutiny will be done by the EAC or SEAC of the documents like final EIA report which he has submitted. Then he will check that what were the public consultations, what were the outcome of public consultations, what happened during the public hearing proceedings. They will ensure that okay, whether all the concerns have been incorporated or not. So this way a detailed scrutiny will be done. Next, please. Okay. Then one more thing. Now there in the beginning only I had told you that there will be one category of project which is the category B2, which does not require public consultation. So the appraisal of all those activities will also be done at this stage, right? So appraisal of all projects or activities which are not required to undergo public consultation or submit EIA report shall be carried out. So based on the prescribed application form 1, I told you about form 1. So form 1 they have to fill and they have to submit, but they don't need to go for the EIA process, or they may have given form 1A. Now what is form 1A? So 1A is the additional document which is required for the infrastructure projects. Those which are infrastructure projects, they have to submit one form which is form 1A, right? And any other relevant information which they have included along with form 1. So based on all that, the authorities will carry out the appraisal. Next, please. Okay. Then at the end of this appraisal process, EAC or SEAC. EAC will be applicable in case of which? Category A. And SEAC will be applicable in category B or B1. So they will recommend to the regulatory authority. What they will recommend? They will recommend either for grant of prior environmental clearance. Means they will grant the environmental clearance along with certain terms and conditions. Of course, at the time of giving the environmental clearance also, again they may impose or they may put terms and conditions. Okay, you are getting environmental clearance, but following the terms and conditions which you will have to follow, right? Then, or if they feel that the project cannot be given the environmental clearance, then they may reject the application for environmental clearance, and along with that they will have to give the reasons why they are rejecting this particular project, right? Then every application shall be placed before EAC or SEAC, and its appraisal completed within 60 days. So again here you can see there is a time limit which is put within which the authority has to give its decision regarding whether EC is given or it is not given, right? And then the applicant shall be informed at least 15 days prior to the scheduled date of EAC or SEAC meeting for considering the project proposal. That means, as I said previously, that the applicant is invited for making a presentation. So he has to be informed at least 15 days before that, okay, your appraisal will take place on that particular date. So they can be present for the appraisal at the regulatory authority. Okay, next please. Okay, then grant or rejection of environmental clearance. So now what I said previously, that was just recommendation of EAC or SEAC. So based on that recommendation, the regulatory authority will convey its decision to the applicant. In case of category A, it will be Ministry of Environment and Forest, and in case of category B, it will be SEIAA. Normally, it accepts the recommendations of the expert committees, but if there is any conflict, then whatever this authority decides, that will be final. If decision is not granted within stipulated time. Now again, this is a clause that if they are not meeting to the timelines, then the applicant may proceed as if environmental clearance has been granted in terms of final recommendations. Next, please. Okay, then again there is a clause for this in the EIA notification, validity of environmental clearance. So environmental clearance is valid for 10 years in case of river valley projects, 30 years for mining projects, and 5 years in case of all other projects and activities, right? So the project should have to be carried out within that time. Area development projects and townships, the validity period shall be limited only to such activities as may be the responsibility of applicant as a developer. Means how much time is required for that infrastructure or that project to be completed, that will be the environmental clearance period. Next, please. So whatever timelines which I have told to you previously, that is shown in the form of a chart over here. First is submission of application, that will be in the format of form 1, along with some preliminary reports, along with its TOR, and who will do it? So the investor means the proponent of the industry, or it may be his consultant who has been authorized to do it for him. Then once it is submitted, then comes which will be the screening. Screening stage will be screening is next will be scoping, both by the expert committee. Screening, they will decide whether it is project B1 or B2. In stage 2, they will come up with terms of reference, that is TOR. This activity completed within 60 days, right? Then after TOR is ready, TOR again it will it will be submitted to the investor or to the proponent. The proponent will prepare the EIA report. EIA carrying out EIA report will at least require the studies for one season, or depending upon the TOR, it may require at least 3 to 6 months at least studies, or maybe 1 year study will be required. So that much will be the time required for the investor to prepare the EIA report. Then again, once the EIA report is prepared and submitted to the authority, the authority will have to carry out the process of public consultation. So public consultation will have to be carried out by State Pollution Control Board, and it has to be done again, as I've shown, within 45 days, right? Then after 45 days, after public consultation, uh, the proponent will have to update the EIA report. He will have to make the changes to the EIA report, and then again it will be submitted for appraisal. Appraisal will be carried out by whom? The expert committee. It has to be completed within 60 days. And then after that, within 15 days, final decision will have to be conveyed, right? That will be by the regulatory authority. So this way we can come to know how much time will be required for the entire EIA and environmental clearance process, right? So this is all regarding the legal aspect of the impact assessment. Now coming to actual how the EIA will have to be carried out, or what will be the different steps for the EIA. So EIA is defined as a 4-step activity. There will be 4 steps which will be required. The first is identification. Just 1 minute. First is the identification process. So what happens when you are actually going for the EIA process? You have to identify that your project is going to affect how many components of the environment, which of the components are likely to be affected by your project. So there are different methods which are suggested for this first step. Next, please. Okay, so impact identification methods. See, first of all, either you can simply make a list that what are going to be the likely impacts. The lists which you prepare, that will be known as checklist. Like I give you an example. I give this example to the students every time I am taking the lecture. That supposing you are going to some market, or you are going to some mall to purchase something, what you will do? You will prepare a list that what are the things which I want from the market or from the mall. Supposing I am going to buy the vegetables, so I will prepare a list that these are the things which I require. So checklist is nothing but like the list showing us what will be the places where your project is going to impact. I have an example of checklist. Next slide, please. Next slide, yes. This is an example. Next, please. See, this is an example which I have taken from internet. So this is a type of checklist which you may prepare. So you will prepare the questions. You will prepare that what will be the different components of the environment which are going to be affected. Like the first question is permanent or temporary change in land use, land cover, or topography, right? So your answer will be either yes or your answer will be no. Supposing you are going for a construction project, so naturally when you are even constructing one room, or if you are constructing one flat, you will be changing the topography, you will be changing the land use. Initially that land might be say agricultural land, or it might be open land, so it is changing, right? So that way you are going to address each and every aspect of the environment. This is the first regarding the land. Then the next question will be regarding the vegetation. Next question will be water. So all the questions will have to be answered yes or no, and then you can even elaborate further by adding the columns. Right? So when you do this type of method, you are not likely to forget any component or aspect which you have not taken into consideration, right? So these checklists are very long lists which are prepared so that you are identifying the components of environment which are likely to be affected by the project, right? Okay, then next please. Second method for identification is impact identification matrix, right? So instead of preparing a long questionnaire about the effects, you simply prepare a sort of matrix having rows and columns. In the column you will be having in the column you will be having the different components of environment, and in the rows you will have the project activities, right? Then for the each square which is formed, you have to decide that whether this activity will affect this component of environment. Like supposing if I say first is plant construction, and the first environmental component is surface water quality. So uh, during the construction of the plant, surface water quality will not be affected, but which what will be affected? So wildlife habitat might be affected, terrestrial wildlife may be affected. So this way you will agriculture may be affected. So this way uh, you compare between the project activities and the environmental components, and all those places where there is going to be a likely impact, you identify that point. So now you have carried out the identification of places where the impact might take place, right? There are many more you can say advanced methods for preparing the identification matrix, and it is very interesting to study about this impact identification matrix, right? So this is all we are doing so that we can identify the likely impacts of the project. Okay, then next please. The next method is network method. So network method, we prepare, we have a chart sort of showing all the ways by which the activities are going to affect different components of environment. Here the example is given for say supposing a highway is constructed, then at that time the vehicle movement is there. So vehicle movement will cause vibration, it will cause dust and exhaust, it will cause noise, it may cause accident. Then further, noise and accident, dust and exhaust will affect on structures, it will affect on plants, it will affect on human health. So you can say you are having the different stages of impacts: primary impacts, secondary impacts, tertiary impacts. So you are expressing all the impacts in the form of network, right? Then we also have one method which is overlay method. I have not drawn, or shown, but the most common are just checklists and metrics. These two are most commonly used worldwide. Network has got its limitation because it becomes very complicated when you have an exhaustive big project, right? Okay, then next please. Okay, for doing the impact identification, one more thing which will be required is baseline environmental studies, that is also known as baseline monitoring. So whenever you are saying that a particular project will affect a particular component of environment, then we have to first say that how was that environment prior to that project. મતલબ એક પ્રોજેક્ટ ચાલુ થયું એના પહેલા શું સ્થિતિ હતી, તો જ આપણે કહી શકીએ કે જ્યારે આ પ્રોજેક્ટ થશે, એક્ઝિક્યુટ થશે, ત્યારે શું થશે, રાઈટ? સો તમારે પહેલા શું અત્યારે શું કન્ડિશન છે એ તમારે ક્વોન્ટિફાય કરવી પડે, એ તમારે નોટ ડાઉન કરવી પડે, એન્ડ દેટ ઇઝ નોન એઝ બેઝલાઇન એન્વાયરમેન્ટલ સ્ટડીઝ. એક નાનકડું એક્ઝામ્પલ આપું કે સપોઝિંગ એન ઇન્ડસ્ટ્રી ઇઝ ટુ બી એસ્ટાબ્લિશ્ડ, રાઈટ? એન્ડ યુ આર આઈડેન્ટિફાઈંગ કે ભાઈ એર ક્વોલિટીમાં ફરક પડશે, એર પોલ્યુશન માઇટ બી ધેર, બરાબર? તો એના માટે તમારે શું કરવું પડે? તમારે કહેવું પડે કે અત્યારે વોટ ઇઝ ધ એર ક્વોલિટી ઓવર ધેર. તમે કહો કે ભાઈ અત્યારે એનું એસપીએમ કોન્સન્ટ્રેશન આટલું છે, SOx ઇઝ ધીસ મચ, NOx ઇઝ ધીસ મચ. દેન યુ કેન સે કે ભાઈ આ ઇન્ડસ્ટ્રી કે આ થર્મલ પાવર પ્લાન્ટ બનશે પછી શું થશે, how much will be your SPM, how much will be your PM10, PM2.5, that you will be able to say. So whenever you will come across an EIA report or कोई भी consultant जे EIA करता हसे, they will be first carrying out this process of baseline studies. So in that case they will have to go to that place, go to that site and monitor at least these parameters: air, water, soil, noise, ecology. They have to carry out the study regarding the number of plants, number of trees, which trees are there, which birds are there, which animals are there. You definitely require an expert ecologist in your team to carry out this component of baseline study, right? Then you will also require to study the socio-economics, that what is the standard of living of the people over there, what was their condition previously. Then you can say, okay, if this project is executed, their condition will improve, like their financial conditions will become better, right? So baseline environmental studies is a very important component of EIA process. Next please. Okay, then comes the second stage, that is environmental impact prediction. એટલે આઈડેન્ટિફિકેશન પહેલા કર્યું, પછી આપણે પ્રેડિક્ટ કરવું પડે. પ્રેડિક્ટની અંદર શું થાય છે, જેમ મેં તમને કીધું કે યુ કેન આઈધર હેવ ઇટ વર્બલી કે એર ક્વોલિટી વિલ બીકમ બેટર, or air quality will become bad, or air quality will not be affected, or say you say water quality will be affected. ચલો water તમે ground water you will take the water, so your water table will go down, right? So everything will have to be predicted scientifically, and you may make use of certain you can say mathematical methods, mathematical models to predict the impact. Like if you have studied about dispersion modeling in air pollution, or you have studied about Streeter-Phelps equation in Diossac curve. So those models, there are many models which can be made use of in the process of impact prediction, and based upon the expertise and based upon this mathematical equations, you can make the predictions, right? And important over here, you will have to make predictions also in the social and economic factors. Okay, then the third step will be impact evaluation. Evaluation means you decide that how much will be the magnitude of the impact. Now, this is a bit difficult part in the sense that how to quantify the magnitude. So, usually, magnitude is quantified in numerical terms from 1 to 10. कि 1 होय तो minimum impact, 10 होय तो maximum impact. So that way it is evaluated. Then it will also be based on duration. It may be happen that, okay, supposing I will give an example that construction is going on right near your house. So there will be impact, there will be effect to you, in the sense there will be lot of generation of dust because of the construction activity, because of the vehicles and all. But then this will be only for how much time? Only the time duration during which the construction is going on. Once construction is over, then maybe you will not have that impact. On the other hand, if the construction was of a highway or of the road, then what happens? Now your impact will be in because of the noise. There may be no effect on dusting and all, but noise might be there, right? Then impact may be based on the reversibility. That, okay, supposing for the construction you are cutting the trees, but then again if you will grow the trees, then you are reversing the intensity of impact, right? So whether it is reversible or whether it is irreversible, then probability whether the impact will occur or not, and the significance, how significant is that impact. Now, one more thing I would like to say over here, that when we are carrying out EIA process, there will be one way of going through the project. There might be other ways also, like supposing if it is manufacturing process, right? So supposing there might be one chemical reaction by which a product may be formed, then there might be some other also. So you have to evaluate all the aspects, or evaluate all the you can say all the alternatives which are possible for that particular project, right? So, and all the alternatives will have to be evaluated so that you can compare and say that which is the best alternative. Next, please. Okay. Then mitigation measures. Generally, what happens that during this evaluation step, the consultant will try to highlight, or he will try to show that what will be the steps which he will take to mitigate or reduce the impact, right? So mitigation is how they will try to reduce the impact. Like examples I have shown, that you can go for change in raw materials. Say if I'm using this coal or such as a fuel, instead of that if I use a cleaner fuel, air pollution will be reduced. If I change a particular chemical, the impact might be reduced. Then they may show change in manufacturing process, or they will say, okay, I will install ATP. So if they will have effluent treatment plant, water pollution will be reduced. If they install air pollution control equipment, then air pollution will be reduced. So these are all the steps which the industry or the applicant is taking to reduce the impacts on the environment, right? So this mitigation measures are also an integral part of the EIA process. So the industry has to highlight what steps it is taking to overcome the problems caused by the project, right? Okay, next please. So this is a slide which I have prepared just to sum up the what is regarding the EIA. So EIA can be regarded as a forward planning tool. Forward planning tool means you are at the time of planning itself, you are deciding or you are taking the decisions in favor of environment. તમે પહેલાથી કમિટ કરો છો કે ઓકે એફ્લુએન્ટ ટ્રીટમેન્ટ પ્લાન્ટ બનાવવામાં આવશે કે એર પોલ્યુશન કંટ્રોલ ઇક્વિપમેન્ટ લગાડવામાં આવશે, and this is all doing to avoid potential potential obstacles in the development, right? So it is everything is done to avoid the potential harmful effects. So it is a forward planning tool. એક વખત ઇન્ડસ્ટ્રી બની ગઈ પછી તમે તમે ટ્રીટમેન્ટ પ્લાન્ટ બનાવવા જાઓ કે તમે બીજું કોઈ બી સ્ટેપ લેવા જાઓ, it is going to be more costly and unplanned. Here you are planning it right from the beginning. Then EIA is an activity which ensures that all environmental considerations are made an integral part of agency's decision making process. So this means that when you are making a decision regarding having an industry or anything, right from the beginning you are taking environmental considerations into the process. And it is a useful tool for preventing environmental conflict, because as I said, later on if there is any conflict, there will be legal requirements, and then the entire project might be affected. So in order to avoid everything, we are planning right from the beginning, and we are avoiding the harm to the environment, and we are avoiding harm to the industry also, right? Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am, for such a valuable and insightful presentation. I think it has cleared all the aspect of EIA. કોઈને કોઈ ડાઉટ કે ક્વેશ્ચન હોય તો મેડમ છે ત્યાં સુધી પૂછી લો. If anyone has doubt or question, please raise your hand and ask the question. બધાને ક્લિયર થઈ ગયો શું EIA છે? બધાને ખ્યાલ આપી ગયો?
So now if you are going for the internship, be and this aspect comes, pay more attention to it and understand what I have tried to tell you.
આમાં ઘણા બધા એન્વાયરમેન્ટલ એન્જિનિયર્સ છે તો એ લોકોને તો ક્વેશ્ચન હોવા જ જોઈએ, તો પ્લીઝ આસ્ક એની ક્વેશ્ચન. જે હેડ ઓફિસમાં છે એ ચેટ બોક્સમાં લખી શકે છે. આઈ થિંક બધાને બધું આવડી ગયું છે. મેડમ બહુ શોર્ટ ટાઈમમાં તમારા માટે પ્રેઝન્ટ થયા છે અને સેશન ડિલિવર કર્યું છે. અમારે બધાએ ક્વેશ્ચન પૂછવા જોઈએ.
મને વધારે તકલીફ એ પડી છે કે બહુ જ વધારે છે અને મેં બહુ જ કોમ્પ્રેસ કરવાની કોશિશ કરી છે.
એકચ્યુઅલી મેમ ટ્રેનિંગ પીરિયડ ઓછો હતો અને સમર ઇન્ટર્નશિપમાં એ લોકોનો ડ્યુરેશન પણ ઓછો હોય છે.
I know એટલે એટલા માટે જેટલું at least now they are familiar with the words, so if they have if they can see further if they like.
અને એ લોકોનું બેકગ્રાઉન્ડ બી સેમ નથી, બધા કેમિકલ બેકગ્રાઉન્ડ વાળા છે, અમુક પીએસસી કેમેસ્ટ્રી વાળા છે, બીએસસી એન્વાયરમેન્ટલ સાયન્સ વાળા છે.
Right.
ઓકે, તો કંઈ નહીં, કોઈ ક્વેશ્ચન કોઈને પછીથી થાય તો મને વોટ્સએપમાં મોકલી આપજો, બરાબર? પછી એના આન્સર મેલ કરી આપીશું. ઓકે મેમ, થેન્ક યુ સો મચ ફોર યોર ટાઈમ.
Thanks a lot. Welcome.
મેમ, તમે લીવ કરી શકશો હવે.
Okay.
થેન્ક યુ મેમ. Okay, now we are going to start our fourth session, which is on online induction training. તો ઇન્ટર્નશિપ માટે બે સ્ટુડન્ટના નામ આવ્યા હતા. એક દિશા પટેલ કરીને છે ને એક દિવ્યા વાઘેલા કરીને છે. એમાંથી ફર્સ્ટ જેને પણ ઇનિશિયેટ કરવું હોય પ્રેઝન્ટેશન એ આમાં સ્ક્રીન શેર કરીને કરી શકે છે.
Hello, ma'am.
હેલો.
Can I
Yeah.
initiate?
Yeah, sure. Start your presentation.
Okay. Is my slides available?
Yes, visible. Go ahead.
Should I start?
Yeah, yes, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
My name is Diya Waghela. I am from MS University, Vadodara. I am pursuing MSc Environmental Science. So I was placed at the regional office, Vadodara, GPCB. So during my internship, I was assigned the work to assist the scientists in the heavy metal analysis in water sample using AAS analytical technique. So why would I choose the internship? What was my objectives? I would like to gain the practical exposure to environment procedures, lab procedures, analytical techniques, which is used for monitoring water sample. And narrowing my interest, I was assigned the work to understand the application of AAS, that is atomic absorption spectrophotometer, for analyzing the heavy metal in environmental sample, and bridging the theoretical knowledge with the practical exposure in a real world data. So now I would like to brief and discuss my work assigned at the GPCB. As we know, heavy metals are the naturally occurring metal, and it is very important and hazardous metal which is affecting the ecosystem and environment. As I would like to share the case which was happened in the globally about the heavy metal bioaccumulation in water and the human, which is affecting all the three pillars of sustainability, that was environment, social, and economy. So heavy metals are the very important parameters, element which need to be monitored for preserving and safeguarding our ecosystem and environment. So here on the screen, I have shared the definition of heavy metals. This is the definition which was mentioned in the AFA protocol, which is followed by the GPCB for analyzing the heavy metals. So heavy metals are the naturally occurring metal whose atomic number is greater than 20 and 40, and element density is greater than 5 gram per centimeter cube. And it can be toxic to the organism environment even at its low concentration. So at the GPCB, I was assigned the total 8 heavy metals to study and analyze. So the 8 heavy metals I studied and analyzed was the copper, zinc, manganese, lead, total chromium, nickel, iron, and cadmium. These are the 8 heavy metals which are analyzed at GPCB using the flame AAS. By monitoring this specific element, it was important for identifying the pollution sources and safeguarding the ecosystem. Now, talking about the sample diversity, sample matrices, I learned that the GPCB was not only confined to the one sources, but it was open to the every sources like groundwater, industrial water, coastal water, and leachate samples. These samples, all the sample requires a different preparation, sample preparation, and the procedure for the accurate heavy metal determination. Talking about the groundwater, as we know, groundwaters are now more available at the agricultural fields, villages, rural areas, and the industrial clusters. Groundwater sources like borewell, head pump. Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Sorry, there was an interruption.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So talking about the groundwater, as we know, groundwater is a drinking water sources in various agricultural sources, agricultural fields, rural areas. It is used for the heavy metal detection in groundwater is used for assessing the water quality and seeing if the industrial activity is affecting the water table or not. Now talking about the industrial waters, as we know, effluent and affluent are the two sources of industrial activities. So seeing whether the industrial activities is impacting the water quality and the surrounding environment and also the public health. Now the coastal waters, specifically to be, I have assisted in the analyzation of channel waters of a river channels. That was monitored for the presence and distribution of heavy metal in marine environment and how the heavy metal is affecting the marine environment. Leachate sample, which was the very important part of my learning. Leachate sample, that is the disposal site and the landfill site where the hazardous waste is dumped from the industries and many municipal. It is contaminating the groundwater and uh, it is contaminating the groundwater and leading the different water sample requires a specific preparation and analytic in the environment. Now talking about the double layers. Double layers is an analytical technique which is widely used over the every labs for determining the heavy metal in environmental samples. So double layers is basically divided into two types, that is a flame double layers and furnace double layers. To be specifically at a GPCB, they are using the flame double layers to analyze those 8 trace heavy metals as I discussed earlier. So here I have shared about the principles of a double layers, that how the double layers is working in analyzing the heavy metals. So my knowledge is authenticated to the instrument made by the PerkinElmer at GPCB, and the whole AAS is operated through the software known as a synergistic software. So as we know, talking about the principle of a AAS, it partially works on the law of a Beer-Lambert law, that the amount of a light is absorbed by the component is directly proportional to the concentration of metal which is present in the sample. So this is the principle on which is forming the basis for the working of a AAS. And as we know, higher the absorbance will be there will be the higher concentration of heavy metals in a sample. And also there is an amount of energy, a targeted element require its own characteristic absorption wavelength. Now talking about the core and components, that is the hardware parts of AAS. So there are the 5 major components of AAS. First, I will discuss about the radiation source. Radiation source, that is a hollow cathode lamp. It is emitting a specific element-specific wavelength which is required for the targeted metal we need to analyze. Suppose we need to analyze the copper, so its wavelength would be said to be 324.8 nanometer, which will be emitted by the radiation source. That is a lamp which is inserted into the AAS. Now talking about the nebulizer and mixing chamber. It is drawing the liquid sample, water sample to the flame via capillary action. It is converting those water sample into the fine aerosol before it is entering into the flame. Now talking about the atomizer. Atomizer is where the we require air and air acetylene gases. The air acetylene gases are the sources which is producing the flame in the AAS. So the flame is converting those sample molecules into the free ground state for the absorption of a wavelength and detecting the presence of a metal in the water samples. Now next component is a monochromator, which is positioned after the flame, which is isolating the unwanted radiation and the flame noises. The lastly talking about the component is a detector and readout system. Detector, that is a photo multiplier tube. It is sensing the intensity of a light light transmitted, and it is converting those optical signals into electrical, and it is finally displaying the results on the software installed by the company. Now I also learned about how the analytical workflow and the framework is done at the environmental laboratory for analyzing any parameter in water samples. To be specifically discussing about the heavy metals, the workflow goes like the first, we need to prepare the sample and acidify it for stabilizing the water contamination and the errors caused during the sampling. By acidifying it, adding the nitric acid. Secondly, the sample digestion is done so that we can break down those organic matter and free the water from errors. Now talking about the standard preparation. Standard preparation is the main step where we need to calibrate the instrument. Standard preparation is done in at GPCB. They are preparing the multi-element standard solution for calibrating the instrument for its proper working. The second most important part is the method setup. Method setup and analysis is all done by the software part. Software is operating those method setups and analysis as we command the software. The wavelengths, lamp setup, probe direction, auto sampler running is all done using the Syngistic software. We need to just command the software with a proper entering the data, like we need to choose the method, we need to set the calibration, and then the analysis will done in the triplicate. Now talking about the result display. After the analysis is done in the triplicate and the standard and mean deviation is all calculated using a software, and it is displayed in the software screen. Now talking about the software calibration and QC. QC is the most important, that is a quality control which is need to be done for the accuracy of an instrument. So to check whether the instrument is working properly in a precision manner, point to QC is done. Point to QC analysis is done in the AAS before executing the sample analysis. Also, the calibration verification is done, as I told earlier, by making the multi-element standards, performing the calibration curves. And all this is done in the software. So the human error is not counted as much as the software is used. So during my internship, I learned the various skills and the various core skill which I needed to learn. So first of all, I learned how to set up the instrument, how to handle the gases, acids, and how to manage the AAS from causing the any trouble. So I also learned about the software proficiency. Like I got more knowledge about the software, that how the manually work is not prevented by using the software. And talking about the laboratory operation, I learned about the sample digestion, sample preparation, and many more awareness regarding the gases handling and acid purity. Lastly, I would like to say that I also learned about the professional development, how the laboratory workflow and the professional teamwork is working at the environment labs. Now, concluding my presentation and my internship, I would like to say that I gained very valuable practical exposure to heavy metal analysis, and I got somehow mastered in the flame AAS, and I also enhanced my understanding in sample preparation, instruments, and many more monitoring skills. And also my technical knowledge and professional skill has been strengthened due to this internship. I would like to thank GPCB and GCPC for allowing me to practice at the GPCB. And I would like to thank everyone who guided me during the journey. Thank you.
Yes, Diya Wagila. Very good presentation. We must appreciate that.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I have few questions
Yes,
as per your internship study.
ma'am.
So why sample digestion is required before heavy metal analysis?
Sample digestion is required so that we can eliminate the contamination which is present, like the dissolved particles which is present in the sample during the collection at the site.
Okay, fine. And why nitric acid is used during the sample preparation?
Sorry, ma'am, your voice is not audible.
Why nitric acid is used during sample preparation?
Nitric acid is used to preserve the sample, and what we can say, we can break down the those organic matter present in the water.
And what are the calibration standards which needs to be maintained before performing the analysis?
So for the calibration, the standard were made from the multi-element, which was ranging from 0.1 ppm, 0.4, 0.6 to 1.0, and for calibrating the instrument, which can be used for the every element we are going to analyze.
Okay, fine. And what about the blank solution standard? What standards needs to be maintained for blank solution?
Sorry, ma'am. I didn't
Blank
understand your
solution.
question.
What standards needs to be maintained about the blank solution?
So blank is used for the saying whether the um, instrument is
Just
working in proper. Hello.
just continue.
So to see whether the instrument is working in a proper way or it is identifying any error due to the contamination.
And if you have performed it, so you have seen that a particular specific wavelength is required for
Yes.
measuring the specific metal.
Yes, ma'am.
So why does each heavy metal require a instrument?
Each heavy metal have their own specific characteristic which require the different and specific wavelength which need to be analyzed. So every heavy metal have its own characteristics, so it requires a different wavelength to be analyzed.
Okay, fine. Very good, Diyaji. And we can also take questions from participants, other participants. Anyone
Hello.
has? Yeah, Mukesh, please.
Hello, Dhruvi this side.
Yeah, Dhruvi.
Okay, I will also ask few questions here.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so what is the standard procedure for filtering the leached sample?
Sorry, ma'am.
What is the standard procedure for filtering the leached sample?
So the leachates, as we know, the leachate sample are comprised of a hazardous element. So the for leachate sample, we need to first dilute the sample into the 10 times dilution. Then we need to analyze those samples. After filtering it, we need to do the 10 time dilution for analyzing the targeted and metal.
Okay, which parameter require immediate analysis and why? Hello.
Ma'am.
Which parameters require immediate analysis and why?
In heavy metals, ma'am.
No, no, I'm asking about generally. Which
Okay.
Which parameter requires
Yes.
immediate analysis just after taking the sample? Which parameters require immediate
pH,
analysis and why?
pH and EC. pH and EC are those parameters which need to be done on the side before it goes to the another temperature at the sample.
Just pH?
No, EC also.
Okay. And what is the purpose of blanks, spike, and duplicate samples?
Blank is taken as the control for the sample. As we know, our sample is contaminated, so we can first testify our instrument is working properly on the blanks and the duplicate samples. And duplicate sample is done for the accuracy of readings.
And purpose of spike sample?
Sorry, ma'am, I don't know about spike sample.
Okay. Okay, no problem.
Yeah, Dhruvi, any other question?
No, no.
And from participants' side, you can also clear your doubt here. Any chemical engineer or environment engineer? No question. Okay, so now let us move ahead. So our next intern is Miss Disha Patel.
Ma'am, should I stop now?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank
Disha Patel.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sharing my screen. Just a sec.
Yeah.
can you see my presentation, ma'am?
Yeah, we can see. Continue.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Disha Patel, and today I'm presenting my internship report on analysis of wastewater samples with the help of different parameters at GPCB. So this internship was completed as part of my master's degree in environmental science under the guidance of Sri T.N. Rana sir and my faculty mentors. Okay, so about GPCB. So, what is GPCB? So, it is a state regulatory body for pollution control, where it is responsible for controlling and preventing pollution in Gujarat by implementing environmental laws and regulations. And it also monitors environmental quality based regulatory monitors water, air, and soil quality. Then it also ensures compliance with environmental laws, means industries are required to follow pollution control standards, and GPCB also ensures they comply with these regulations. And it also conducts laboratory analysis of environmental samples, where the environmental samples are collected from industries and natural resources, and they are tested in laboratories to determine their quality and pollution levels. So the objective of my internship was to gain practical laboratory experience, and I wanted to learn how environmental analysis are actually performed in professional laboratories. And I also understood the environmental monitoring techniques. This internship actually helped me understand methods used to monitor pollution and assess environment qualities. Then I also learned analytical methods for water quality assessment, where I learned standard laboratory procedures used to determine the important water quality parameters. So the parameters I studied were chloride, sulfate, and TDS, where uh, chloride is a major dissolved ion in water, and it also helps to assess salinity and contamination level. Then sulfate is naturally present in water, but excessive concentration can also affect water qualities and industrial processes sometimes. Then total dissolved solids, it represents the total concentration of dissolved substance, such as salts and minerals, which are present in water. First of all, I performed the chloride analysis, where this is the principle of chloride analysis, where chloride ion present in water are determined by agentometric method, which is also known as Bohr's method. The sample is titrated with standard silver nitrate solution using potassium chromate as an indicator. So the chloride ion basically reacts with silver nitrate solution to form silver chloride precipitates. Here, this potassium chromate is an indicator which helps to identify the endpoint of titration. And this was my observation, where I observed that the color changed from yellow to brick red. This indicated the this indicated the presence of chloride ions, which have reached the end point. Then chloride concentration varied among samples, means there were different samples uh, uh, present at the laboratory which I performed, and the different wastewater samples were containing different amount of chloride depending on their source and composition. So this is the significance of chloride analysis, where it indicates salinity, means the higher chloride concentration increase the salinity of water, and high chloride may cause erosion as well. Means if excess chloride is present, then it can damage pipes, storage tanks, and also industrial equipments through corrosion. Second, I performed sulfate analysis, And this is the principle of sulfate analysis, where sulfate ion react with barium chloride to form barium sulfate suspension. The turbidity produced is proportional to sulfate concentration and is measured spectrophotometrically by turbidimetric method. So here sulfate ions react with barium chloride to form barium sulfate, which creates turbidity in the sample. This was my observation, where I observed that when sulfate ion concentration is increased, the more barium sulfate particles were formed, making the solution cloudier. And significance of sulfate analysis is excess sulfates can cause scaling. Means high sulfate levels can also lead to scale formation inside pipes and also industrial equipments. And it also affect drinking water quality. Means if very high sulfate concentration, then it can affect the taste and also quality of drinking water. Then I also perform TDS, where TDS represents the dissolved inorganic and organic substance present in water. It is determined by evaporating a filtered sample and measuring a residue left after drying at 180 degree. So when I perform this, TDS is determined by evaporating a filtered water sample, and then after that measuring the weight of solid dissolved solids left behind. And I observed that samples showed different dissolved solid contents. Means the amount of dissolved salts and minerals varied among different wastewater samples and also industry samples. It also indicated mineral and salt content. TDS also provides information about concentration of dissolved substance which are present in water, and it affects water suitability. Means if higher TDS can make water unsuitable for drinking, industrial use, and also environmental discharge. These are my key learning outcomes. I learned hands-on experience in water analysis, where I personally performed these analytical procedures and observed laboratory operations. Then understanding of laboratory instruments, where I learned how to use laboratory equipments such as spectrophotometer, then ovens and titration apparatus. I also the knowledge of standard analytical procedures, where I became familiar with standard methods used for environmental sample analysis. And these are the challenges and skills that were developed, in which accurate sample handling, where proper sample collection and preparation are essential for obtaining reliable results. So these are the challenges. And maintaining precision during analysis, this was very important. My guide told me that small errors and significantly small errors can affect your results, so accuracy was very important during this analysis. Then time management in laboratory work. Multiple analysis had to be completed within time limits, so you have to maintain specific time by performing your laboratory work. Then teamwork and professional communication, where working with laboratory staff also improved my communication skills and my ability to work in professional environment. I'm grateful to GPCB for providing me with this opportunity to gain my practical exposure. And I'm also thankful for TN Rana sir, because he guided me throughout my analytical work and helped me understand this laboratory procedures. And all the staff also supported my learning and helped me create a professional environment during my internship period. So thank you so much. This internship provided me with my practical exposure to environmental monitoring, and also helped me to understand the importance of laboratory analysis in pollution control. So, thank you so much.
So yes, Tisha, you have made a very good presentation.
Thank you.
So now let's come to the questions.
Yes.
So why silver nitrate is used during chloride analysis?
Because silver nitrate, while titrating it with your sample, it forms silver chloride, which is a very insoluble precipitate, and then we can analyze chloride.
Okay. Just a minute. And what is the principle of sulfate analysis?
Sulfate analysis. Here, in sulfate analysis, the sample is sulfate ions are reacted with barium chloride, which is BaCl2, and which forms barium sulfate, and it indicates the turbidity which is produced in your sample.
And why barium chloride is used during the sulfate analysis?
Barium chloride.
Yes.
Because when barium ion react with sulfate ion, it forms barium sulfate, and which is barium. Mm, Sorry, ma'am, I don't know about this because.
Okay, read about this later on.
Okay, ma'am.
And you have selected only chloride, sulfate, and TDS.
Yes, and my main work was on TDS under the guidance of T.N. Rana sir.
Mhm. Okay. So, which industrial wastewater generate more TDS, मतलब higher TDS wastewater?
Which industrial
Yeah,
water?
yeah. Which sector of industry generate more higher TDS of wastewater?
Means the textile industries and
Yes.
chemical industries.
Yes. Yeah. So, have you referred any treatment option?
Sorry, ma'am.
Have you referred any? Have you studied about the treatment options for this high TDS containing wastewater?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So your focus was on just analysis point of view.
Yes, ma'am. And I also asked them about the samples, but they told me that malab, we are not allowed to know where are the samples coming from. So.
No. જીપીસીબીમાં પૂછવાની જરૂર નથી, આ તો જનરલ છે ને, મતલબ કઈ ઇન્ડસ્ટ્રી વધારે ટીડીએસ વાળું વેસ્ટ
हाँ 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 એટલે एक्चुअली मैं પૂછ્યું હતું કે સેમ્પલ કઈ ઇન્ડસ્ટ્રીમાં તો એમને કીધું કે આ અમે ઇન્ફોર્મ નથી કરી
not asking about the name of industry but sector of the industry.
ઓકે
Yeah. Dhruvi, from your side, any questions?
Yes, Disha.
યસ મેમ
What is the formula of chloride?
ફોર્મ્યુલા ઓફ ક્લોરાઇડ
Yes, chloride formula, TDS formula, how will you calculate?
Okay, ma'am. In TDS, we have to subtract your the post weight minus pre weight and multiplied by volume of sample.
And chloride?
In chloride also, like volume of silver nitrate, we have to subtract that from volume of silver nitrate blank, means blank minus sample, and multiplied by the normality, and into that equivalent weight of chloride, and divide by volume.
Okay. And what is TDS measure? Only organic or inorganic content?
We can measure both organic and inorganic content while analyzing TDS.
What is the holding period for TDS? Like if you cannot treat that sample immediately after collecting that sample, so what is the holding period that at least in this time period you can do analysis of TDS? Holding time.
Holding maximum, I guess, 6 to 7 days. We can hold TDS sample. and we have to store that water sample.
Do you know the
In
preservation?
preservation,
Preservation for TDS parameters.
no, that I haven't learned in my analysis. It was just method and the
So you
results.
analyze sulfate.
Yes, ma'am.
So you use spectrophotometer, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you measure at which wavelength?
420 nanometer.
Okay. Done from my side.